My name is Scott Challoner, and you are listening to the Leaders Council podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. As far as our regular listeners on this programme will indeed know very well, part of our mission here at the Leaders Council is to bring you a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership. And to this end, we're joined on the programme today by Kevin Towers, the CEO of Techbuyer, a business that provides sustainable IT solutions to organisations across more than 100 countries. Kevin, very warm welcome to yourself today, and thank you for joining us on the show, dialing in from all the way in the US, I believe, today.
Thank you very much, Scott. Yes, that's right. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a real pleasure, Kevin. And obviously, for those people listening in that aren't familiar with Techbuyer and what the company does, we're going to be talking about the values-driven success of the business and sort of how the company kind of developed, came into being, and has been founded on sustainable principles. So just going right the way back to the beginning of the business then, Kev, just to start with. I think it would be good to start by just addressing how did sort of Techbuyer really first come into being?
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, well, we're a sustainable IT solutions provider, and really the core of the business is built around, or was built around originally, buying back used IT equipment that had been used by corporate clients. And really refurbishing it, bringing it back to factory standards, and then reselling it. We had fairly humble beginnings back in the day. We've been going since 2005, but we started off in my mum's garage. You know, God bless her soul. She put us up for a good few years, and that's kind of how we started. Quite humble beginnings.
Yeah, it certainly seems the case, and obviously from those humble beginnings, sort of starting the business sort of from home at your parents' house. I mean, it's like you've grown to a business that now employs over 250 people, and you're sort of working not just in 100 countries, but also over 3 different continents as of this year as well. So how did you kind of get from that position, starting from, you know, sort of the garage of your parents' house, to get to growing the business so exponentially?
Quite honestly, you know, at the start, when we first started the business, really the main objective was just to put food on the table. And, it was very challenging to get the business going back in those days. Very much hand to mouth within the business. We didn't have a lot of, you know, cash flow resource and so on. So the people who started the company, we worked, you know, very, very, very hard, very, very, very long hours to get things going. We brought a lot of junior staff into the business in those early days. We really spent a lot of time in training those guys and girls in our kind of way of working, I suppose. You know, just kind of going the extra mile. You know, working the extra hours, quite honestly, in order to get things rolling, get things moving. And in those early years, growth was actually quite limited. It wasn't until probably, I don't know, I guess we were sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years into the business that things really started to get going. And in the last few years, you know, you're right, a lot of things have dropped into place nicely, and we are enjoying very, very fast growth at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously the way the business sort of developed in those sort of very formative years, that sort of remained a real cornerstone of the company's values, hasn't it? And that sort of, you know, that people philosophy, that community philosophy, and, you know, the sustainability elements of it. I suppose that's kind of underpinned everything that you've done since then, hasn't it? And that growth that you've gone on has been sustainable. And obviously it's not just like the business itself and the number of employees that you have that's grown. It's also like the kind of the spectrum of services that's developed with that as well. Obviously you started out, as you say, you're just obviously selling used IT equipment, but now it's like you provide the full range of solutions. So that includes like sustainable IT services such as refurbishment, disposition, buyback, spare parts, sort of full sort of software and hardware solutions, but also consultancy as well. So I think it's fair to say that the business really has grown in more ways than one, hasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly has. I think so. Yeah, I think that core group of people that we kind of grown and developed together over the years, and then certainly in recent years, we have diversified quite significantly. We've now got bases in the USA, which is where I am now, in Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Canada, more recently as well. But it's really been about, building and growing a really good group of people that feel like they're supported, feel like they like each other, feel like they can work well together, feel like they're comfortable to come up with their own ideas and suggestions about how they can improve either their own work area or more broadly speaking, what ideas do you have for diversification of the business, for doing things in a different way. So it's all been very much around, the people. I certainly wouldn't describe myself as a technical expert or anything like that, but what the thing that I've really tried to work hard on is building that kind of community within the company, and that has led to really nice things. And I think it's a really nice place to work in each of the different offices, that creating that nice environment to work within. As long as you've got a healthy, willingness to work hard as well, I think that turns into a really productive environment. And you're absolutely right. So we started out doing refurbishing used IT equipment. We now offer our customers and clients a fully circular business model. We sell refurb and new IT solutions and spare parts businesses. We still continue to buy back the old equipment and refurbish it and resell it again. And more recently, we now provide IT sustainability services and consultancy to both businesses and, again, more recently to government as well.
Yeah, so exponential growth of the service provision as well. And I think the growth of the business is something as well that hasn't gone unnoticed, has it? The business has, of course, won a multitude of awards, certainly in the last couple of years, but also recognised as one of the top 100 fastest growing businesses in the north of England at the Northern Tech Awards this year. But given like that kind of people philosophy that you have, Kev, I get the impression that success at Techbuyer isn't just measured on recognition and awards from outside the business. So I would like to get an idea that when it comes to success, what is your definition of success at Techbuyer? What does success really look like for the business?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's a multitude of different things. But again, for me personally speaking, I think we've got lots of goals, we've got lots of targets, that sort of thing. Throughout the business, everybody's got their own aims and progression plans and that sort of thing. But for me personally speaking, I think the growth and the diversification and that's great, and I love that. But I think most of all, it is working with the people and seeing them progress. I think that most of our senior directors within the business today and managers are people that started with the business in their early 20s or mid 20s. 10 plus years down the line now, they're senior managers and directors. And, for me, that brings a lot of pride, I suppose. It's been really, really great to see. So for me personally, I think continued growth, it's always good to aim for growth. Continued happy people that feel like they've got a plan, and continued diversification. I think the IT market and the technology market in general is so huge. I think there's lots more that we can do with the team that we've got.
And do you think sort of constantly looking at what more you can do and then kind of measuring success on, that more element, as you do more, of course, you measure the outcomes of that. Would you say that that's also important for sort of what you would view as success?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think we have a number of. So we have a group holding company within the UK, and then we have warehouses in a number of different countries and businesses in a number of different countries, and they've all got their individual growth plans. In recent times, we've been growing at 25% year on year, and I'm looking to continue that. I think there's a number of things that are going to feed into that. The worldwide shortage in chip supply and various raw material supply actually plays nicely into our hands because we hold stock of a lot of refurbished items, for example, that are a really good alternative to new equipment. And I think that's going to play into our hands nicely for future growth. But yeah, certainly sales growth, growth in the number of employees, all yardsticks for success, certainly. But my primary aim always, feeds back to, there's no point in having huge growth if you don't have a happy team, because at some point the wheels will fall off. So I very much personally look to make sure that we have a happy team in place. So that fuels the growth.
Yeah, exactly right.
Sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, and obviously we've kind of established there the parameters for success at Techbuyer. What you measure success against. So, what would you say then would be the driving force behind the success of the business against those parameters that you've laid out? So, what makes the people within the business happy? What kind of paves the way for sort of that growth? What would you say the sort of the secret is, as it were?
It's a good question. And I think, first of all, people have got to know that you care about them. It sounds a little bit groovy, or it can sound a little bit groovy, but people have got to know that you care. And once that kind of two-way relationship is built within people and teams, then that turns into increased productivity. Quite honestly. So I think that's probably the bedrock for it.
Yeah, so I get the impression that there's more kind of a collaborative sort of approach there. So whereas within some businesses you might have like 1, 2, 3 individuals that maybe the problem solvers that you go to sort of resolve everything. Within Techbuyer, that really doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, it's like everybody obviously has the opportunity to kind of chip in, and everybody feels appreciated in that sense, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. We very much encourage ideas sharing and collaboration and that sort of thing. And there's one or two things that we do differently to really any other organisation that I'm aware of, certainly in our field anyway. So there's a lot of, we pay bonuses to certain staff, sales staff and that sort of thing. But we don't pay individual bonuses, generally speaking. We pay team bonuses, and we kind of incentivise people for working together, working collaboratively, not fostering silos, making sure that information is shared, opportunities are shared between people and teams, because it is very easy, especially within a growing organisation, for the tendency for people to look out for their own interests, operate in silos, that sort of thing. So there's very much an emphasis on trying to make sure that there is as much collaboration as possible, because again, it just really, really works.
It does, doesn't it? And I suppose, obviously, when you have kind of a team of people there who are sort of, willing to speak up as well, I guess when, there are sort of kind of contentious issues, let's say, not necessarily contentious, but, sort of issues where, like, you might have one idea about how to go forward on a particular project, and then everybody's got kind of like maybe not necessarily conflicting ideas, but different ideas to contribute. I suppose that kind of the challenging of ideas amongst groups, that friendly challenge, I guess what that does is that it's imperative to driving innovation forward as well, isn't it? So that sort of shows the importance of that kind of team mentality and having lots of different opinions at the table, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And I think you have to work quite hard to make sure that people do feel comfortable with, raising ideas that may be, if somebody thinks that something isn't working or could be done better, people aren't always willing to stand up and put their hand up and be the person that points that out. So again, it's something that we work quite hard on, making sure that there's good relationships between everyone, and so people do feel comfortable to point out issues, because otherwise, the issue is going to pop up somewhere and bite us in the bottom at some point anyway. So we do work hard to try and make sure that people feel comfortable to put their hand up.
Yeah, absolutely right, and that's perfectly understandable. And obviously, one of the big things that the teams are sort of coming together to really help with is, of course, the sort of upholding that sustainable element of the business as well. And I do want to kind of delve into that a little bit more, because obviously we established very early on in this discussion that Techbuyer and sustainability basically go hand in hand. But given the kind of let's say, the wastefulness of the tech sector, because it is so difficult to recycle so many sort of technological materials, particularly with laptops and things like that. It might seem outwardly that sort of technology and sustainability kind of shouldn't go together. They're almost like a kind of a contradiction in a sense, but is sort of Techbuyer's role in a sense to try and, challenge that kind of status quo idea and show that actually, tech and sustainability can come together and can sort of be part of that circular economy?
I think so, yeah. So I think really we were operating in a circular fashion before the circular economy was even a sort of a catchphrase. Obviously, at the moment, it's a very big focus: sustainability, reuse, that sort of thing, which is a fantastic thing. It's absolutely necessary because we throw away far too much stuff, and the world only has a finite amount of natural resources. So we've always operated in that way. I think that you could easily think that IT is IT and sustainability don't really go together, but we're all about reuse. So IT is a thing. Technology drives the world. That's just a fact, and that's not going to change. So what our ambition is really just to make sure that as much as possible in terms of computing equipment, spare parts, so on, is reused. Because really in the past, we had a society for the past 40 years or so where, it was take it out of the ground, make stuff and throw it away, make, throw away. So we're really fighting against that and trying to make sure, doing our best to make sure that as much as possible is reused, put back into the economy. An old laptop might be worthless to you, but it could be refurbished, reused, sent to schools, sent to charities, put back into businesses in emerging nations. There's all sorts that can be done, as opposed to the traditional route in recent years. People talk about recycling. Recycling is good, but it only goes so far. Reuse is much better because you're putting the equipment back into reuse straight away rather than wasting all that time, money, energy, carbon in breaking it down and then building it back up again.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think there is something as well that kind of has really highlighted the importance of that sort of sustainable outlook. I mean, we've talked about obviously the fact that the Earth has very finite resources. So things like cobalt mining and things like laptops, mobile phones. I mean, that is a resource that if we keep kind of using it in the way that we are, is not going to be around forever. And as well as that, we've kind of been really sort of made acutely aware of the urgency of the climate emergency, given the events of the last couple of years with COVID as well, haven't we? We're far more aware of the fact that the climate emergency is the next big thing that we're all going to have to face together. So it just shows the urgency of the action that you're taking, doesn't it? And hopefully, there may be other business leaders that are tuning into this discussion and might be thinking, well, what can we do? How can we kind of come on board with this and sort of make our own businesses sustainable and, reduce our environmental impact?
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we as a society throw away, an inordinate amount of e-waste. E-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. And it very much needs to be a focus. And I think it is, very much so. Things are changing for sure. So I think businesses, individuals, don't throw it away. Don't put it to landfill. If you possibly can, if you're a business, contact a company like ourselves. We will be able to at least dispose of the equipment in a safe and secure and environmentally friendly way. Very possibly, if people have got old IT equipment, we'll be able to buy it back. So we'll be able to give them some money, put back into their business to spend on other things. So it's kind of a sensible, just a sensible thing to do. Don't throw it away. See if you can do something with it. See if you can give it to a company like ourselves that will do our best to put it back into reuse. If we don't refurbish and then put it back into reuse, we break it down into spare parts, and we use those spare parts to improve other items. So it's a sensible thing, and I think it's very much built into our DNA. My mother always used to say, "Waste not, want not." That was one of her sort of catchphrases, back in those days. And I think that's what we should do. save what we can.
We should, shouldn't we? And I think it's important to stress, isn't it, that it's far more than just a gimmick, this, or just sort of a, a sort of post-COVID fad. I mean, this is something that is incredibly important. If action isn't taken, we're going to find ourselves quickly running out of certain resources. And, we're going to find that there could be some significant damage done, certainly from the sort of the global temperature perspective.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You're right. There is only a finite amount of resource in the world, and we're using it up very, very quickly. I've heard stats before, I think, quoting that we're using it at twice the rate that the world can replenish. So it certainly needs to be a focus. And as I say, and you pointed out some of the raw materials there. IT is just electronic equipment in general is a big focus, needs to be a big focus. As I say, it's the fastest growing waste stream in the world, and we need to curtail that. We've got to reuse what we can.
We do, absolutely right. And interestingly as well, when we think about sort of the future of the tech sector, certainly, this is going to be part, just for the listeners tuning in, the first part of a three-part series with Techbuyer senior leadership team. Of course, we have Kev with us today, but we are going to be later talking with Techbuyer's sustainability lead, Astrid Wynn, and also Rich Kenny as well, the managing director of the Interact division, and who also heads up Techbuyer's research team, to talk sort of about sort of innovation in the area of IT sustainability. So there's plenty more to come on that side of things. And the reason why I wanted to bring up the fact that those discussions will be coming up very soon is the fact that into the future, and this is obviously for your attention now, Kev, there's obviously legislation on the horizon which is going to be measuring businesses and their, sort of climate impact, the kind of carbon emissions that they're going to be emitting, and trying to regulate those. So with all of that in mind, with those kind of changes on the horizon, and, governments trying to sort of shoehorn business into being more sort of sustainable conscious, how do you kind of see the tech industry as a whole developing from this point in time into the future?
I think there's very much going to be a focus on sustainability and reuse. In fact, we're seeing the major brands out there talking about these issues a lot, and I think we'll continue to see that. Many businesses have got a much greater focus on their ESG goals these days on sustainability. In terms of Techbuyer specifically, or our Techbuyer group, we have, as you just mentioned a moment ago, we've been working on a new software tool over the last few years, and I think you'll talk to Rich Kenny about this in more detail in the next episode, or in one of the next episodes. But that piece of software is a world first, a unique piece of software, and it helps organizations that are running data centers to analyze their data center server estate for energy efficiency, carbon footprint, carbon use, and performance. And it enables them to come up with alternative configurations and potentially alternative technology that they can use within their data centers to drive operational energy efficiency and help them reduce their carbon footprint. And I think these kind of issues are going to become very much more at the forefront of people's minds. And I think there's going to be a much greater focus on that, on reducing energy, reducing carbon footprint, that sort of thing.
Absolutely right. And as you sort of, try and exercise those ambitions, are you going to be targeting as well sort of further sustainable growth for Techbuyer as a business? What's next for sort of yourselves from that perspective, do you think?
Well, I think for us, it's going to be more of the same, continued growth in both in the United Kingdom and also further afield in our other operations in Europe and APAC and the USA. And looking at, growth of our online ambitions as well. We run a number of different websites that sell predominantly refurbished equipment and spare parts. We're going to, push those websites, try and do more, make our products and services available to more clients in those regions and beyond. And back to Interact again. I think we're going to be pushing into it very hard. We've had some really nice successes recently. One was a financial services company that bought it, and push that out into the market more, because it's it is a big focus. Sustainability is a big focus, and we're fortunate in many ways that we're in prime place to do more of what we're doing today.
Exactly right, and with sort of Techbuyer being kind of an emerging force on the sort of that front, I suppose that kind of pre-existing monopoly that was there in sort of the supply and repair side of the industry, which sort of bigger OEM providers had dominated for so long. Do you see sort of a real levelling of the playing field as Techbuyer becomes more and more successful?
I think so, yeah. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that everybody knows about the component supply issues, the chip shortages. That really does play nicely into our hands, and other organisations like ourselves who are selling refurbished products as an alternative to new. At the moment, we also sell new solutions. We sell what's best for the customer, right? So we sell new and we sell refurb. A lot of the new equipment now is on a 12-month lead time, an 18-month lead time, possibly even more with some certain products. That is just unheard of. But what it's doing is it's forcing companies and people to think about alternative supply, to think about refurb as a viable solution. We in the past have benchmarked refurb against new in live environments, in big trade shows, and proved that refurb is a very, very, very viable alternative to new, and in certain circumstances it can outperform new. So these circumstances, chip shortages, it's forcing organisations to think about alternatives, and refurb is becoming much, much more popular. And I see that continuing. I think it's a sensible choice to at least consider refurb, because you can pay sometimes 50, 60, 70, 80% less than a new alternative, and you're getting something that performs just as nicely as new. So I think that's going to continue. And I think also there is a movement within government or within business that is pushing against some of the OEM ways of working in the past, I guess. Some of the OEMs have made it quite restrictive in terms of repairing devices that you may have bought. I see that changing. There's a big push called the right to repair in Europe and in the USA, where people are trying to push for the ability to repair their own devices, the ability for third-party independent shops to be able to repair devices for you, rather than being forced to send the device back through the OEM and essentially getting charged an extortionate amount for a small repair, or being told that the device can't be repaired because it's out of service. So I see a more open market. I see bigger choice as a consequence of the things that I've just been talking about, and a better market for the consumer.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you think of what that kind of better consumer market could consist of? Because when you think of the big OEM providers, I mean, there are so many software and firmware updates to sort of devices these days that have to be considered as well. So when it comes to the right to repair, there's so much that ties into that, and that's certainly something that I'll be talking about in the next episode with Astrid Wynn as well. Certainly something to look forward to everyone tuning into this one today. So please don't miss that. And lastly, Kev, just before we wrap up as well, I suppose when it comes to what's on the horizon for the tech sector, a lot of talk is about sort of, the rise in automation and the rise of sort of AI. And some people might be a little bit apprehensive about that side of things. But sort of what's your kind of view on that just before we finish up?
I think it's really exciting. What technology can do today is just incredible, astounding. I think, again, quoting our Interact tool, it's a machine learning software tool. It can do incredible things. It's a world first. And, without that machine learning element, we just couldn't do it. So I think it's very, very exciting. I think some people, worry about job losses, that sort of thing. I think it'll create jobs. I think that, it's very, very exciting. I don't think people should be scared about what the future holds. I think they should be excited about technology, and just as long as we're driving improvement, driving efficiency, I think we can shift the workforce elsewhere. If we make some savings in headcount somewhere, we reallocate and we do more exciting things. So I think the future looks bright.
It certainly does, and we should really look into the future with open eyes and open arms for sure. And speaking of Interact as well, again, everyone tuning in, I will be talking in a lot more detail about that division of Techbuyer and its work with Rich Kenny, who heads that side of things. So again, very, very exciting stuff to tune into later on in the series. For now, Kev, it's been amazing welcoming you onto the show today, and incredibly enlightening as well. Really, really enjoyed having you on. And by all means, do take care and stay safe with all that's still happening in the world. And as we start to see, these projects kind of take hold and we see their impact, I think it'd be a wonderful thing to maybe even catch up and have you back on the show in future just to see how things are all coming along with it.
Thanks ever so much, Scott. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, and that'd be great. Thank you. Have a super weekend.
Yourself as well, Kev, and I'd also reiterate that message to all of the listeners tuning in today as well. I do hope that you thoroughly enjoyed the interview with Kevin Towers today, the CEO of Techbuyer, and myself, your host on the Leaders Council podcast, Scott Challoner. Just a reminder to all tuning in, if you do want to find out a little more about Techbuyer and the work that it does, and you feel impassioned about some of the issues that we've gone over today, then techbuyer.com would be a good port of call to find out more about the business. And if you are a business owner and you feel you have your own story to share with us here at the Leaders Council about what your own business is doing, or even another issue that is of importance to you, then by all means you too can apply to be on the programme via leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. Until next time, to everybody tuning in, please do take care and goodbye.